Next, I'd like to talk about the specific windows that you'll use most frequently throughout these live lessons videos. And before I get into those individual windows, I want to reiterate a point that I made back in the prior lesson about the concept of auto-hiding windows. So as of right now, there are actually several windows already open inside of the Visual Studio window. We have the data sources window here on my screen, which is hidden. We've got the form1.cs design window, which is an editor window displayed over here in the left side of the IDE at the moment. We have the Solution Explorer window, as well as a couple of additional windows down here, the Team Explorer and Class View, and we also have the Properties window displayed as well. Now, for any of the windows that you have inside the IDE, you have the ability to reposition them to meet your own needs. You have the ability to display them and pin them to a specific location, or to auto-hide them, as is the case here with the data sources window at the moment. When you have an auto-hidden window, if you click its tab, the window will expand. If you click its tab again, it will go away. Also, if you have it expanded and you click in another window, the auto hidden tab will go back to tab form instead of window form. And finally, when you have an auto hidden window, if you would like to pin it to the user interface, you can click the little pin icon here, and when you do that, it switches to a vertical orientation and places that window where it last appeared inside of the IDE. So again, if I unpin that, now the data sources window goes away and I can bring it back and forth as I need it in my development process. So similarly over here, if I wanted to auto hide the Solution Explorer, I can click that, and now all of the tabs that were within that area of the IDE wind up collapsed here on the right hand side, and for any one of them I can click the corresponding tab to hide or to show and hide that particular window. And similarly, we have the properties window here, which we could auto hide as well. And because in these videos I have to work at a relatively low screen resolution for video purposes, I will often auto hide windows like this to give me a little bit more space on the screen to show you the source code as we work our way through the live lessons. Now that we've demonstrated auto hide, let me bring back the Solution Explorer window and pin it, and the Properties window and pin it as well. By the way, if you don't like the position of a given window, you can drag the window to a different position, and you'll wind up with these icons that show you, as you hover over them, where you would then dock the window if you prefer to change its position. So for example, if I prefer to have the Properties window docked at the left side, I could drop it right now, and you can see the blue highlight at the left side of my screen showing where the window would appear. If I drag it back over to the right here, it would appear docked to the left of the Solution Explorer. If I drag it over the Solution Explorer window, you can see when I hover over the bottom icon here, it will redock it in its original position. Now, in this case, I want to focus a little bit more on the Solution Explorer window, which is where you'll manage all of the files for your project. As you'll see in later lessons, sometimes you'll have multiple projects within a solution, and certainly if you work on big projects in industry, you'll often have multiple projects within a solution. Only one of those projects will ever have a bold name, and that's the so-called startup project. When you tell Visual Studio to launch a project by clicking the Start button here, or by going to the Debug menu and selecting one of the options to run the program, that startup project is the one that's going to be launched as a result of that operation. So you'll see the so-called startup project shown in bold, and if you had additional projects, which we do not have here, they would show up in plain text within the Solution Explorer. Now, By default, the Solution Explorer shows you just the files that you'll typically need to manipulate, but there is a button up here on the Solution Explorer toolbar that allows you to show all of the projects within the file, and that's a toggle button. So if I click that to toggle it, now we get a couple of additional folders showing up, and these are auto-generated folders that contain auto-generated compiled code that the project uses. And similarly, if I toggle that back, then those hidden files disappear and you don't have direct access to them anymore right here inside the Solution Explorer. And of course, we've seen these arrows previously. So this arrow indicates an expanded node, whereas this hollow one indicates a contracted node. So if I want to contract the project folder, I can by clicking the arrow. And now, of course, I can click it again to expand and show the contents of the project. Similarly, form1.cs is a node, and if I expand that, I can see not only do we have form1.cs, but we also have form1.designer.cs, which we're going to talk more about towards the end of this lesson when we build an actual graphical user interface. This is where the auto-generated code goes for your graphical user interface. So as you build the GUI visually over here, the IDE writes code in this file that it keeps separate so that you don't accidentally modify that code and potentially corrupt the user interface. And then separately, there's a node for the class form1 as well, and if I double click that, it takes me into the source code that is behind the scenes of the form that we're designing. And for the purpose of our first GUI app that we're going to build in this lesson, we won't be writing any C# code, but when you get to lesson 14 on graphical user interfaces, at that point we'll be taking a look at interactive GUI apps. Another key window that you'll be using frequently in these live lessons videos, especially or particularly rather when you start building graphical user interfaces, is the so-called toolbox window. Now, on your system, the toolbox may already be displayed, or it may be collapsed as a tab over here at the left side of the IDE. If it's not displaying, as is the case for me at the moment, you can go to the View menu to pull up the toolbox option, or you can use the shortcut key shown here. So let me go ahead and display the toolbox. And within the toolbox, you're going to see that there are various categories of GUI controls that you can drag onto the form that you're designing. The All Windows Forms entry is where you'll find just a alphabetical list of all the different GUI controls that you can drag on, but there's also more specific categories. For example, the most commonly used controls are listed here in the Common Controls category, so you can pick from these if you would like. And you can literally drag and drop these directly onto the form, or double click them to have whichever one you double click appear initially in the upper left corner of the form, and I'll talk more about that when we get to building our graphical user interface shortly. The last of the windows that you'll use frequently in these live lessons videos is the Properties window, and we'll specifically be working with this Properties window when we build our simple GUI that displays text and an image in a subsequent video of this lesson. Now, within the Properties window, for whatever you have selected here in Design View, or for whatever you have selected in the Solution Explorer, it will show you properties of that thing. So for the moment, the Form1 object is selected here, and you can see it shows me that at the top of the Properties window. And what you're seeing here are properties of this GUI component, this window. In particular, down here you can see the text property, which has the value form1. That's showing up here in the title bar of the window. And so if I change that value, so I'll just backspace over that and say title bar just for argument's sake, and press enter, and now you see title bar showing up at the top of the window. So very quickly and easily you can configure the values of the different properties that you see here. Here's the size property, which says that this window's width and height are 300 and 300 respectively. If I change the width from 300 to say 600, and hit enter, now you can see that the window is twice as wide as it was a moment ago. Similarly, if I go up here and select something in the properties window, then you see properties of whatever is selected. So this is my project, Windows Forms Application 3, and you can see it's telling me what the project file is, and if you have something that's getting cut off, you can hover over it to see a tooltip with the complete name. If I select form1.cs, then it shows me properties of that specific file. If I select the class form1, then it shows me that the name of the class is form1. So the properties window is always context sensitive based on whatever it is that you currently have selected within the IDE.